Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Scholar AI Founders Pod. Please find us at all the usual podcast locations and find us at our YouTube channel on the Scholar AI YouTube account. Please remember to leave your comments in the section below, and we'll get to them in some upcoming conversations. So, welcome back, everybody. Joshi, why don't you go ahead and start? You've been doing some traveling over the last week, and we're excited to hear about that.
I'm a brand new man. I am now PADI scuba certified, which gives me superpowers. I can explore ocean depths. On but I'll tell you a cool story. So I was with my older son and an instructor, and we were kind of roaming around 40 feet, 45 feet, in Roatan in the Caribbean, which is an island of Honduras, and it's got the second largest barrier reef, by the way. So if you're going to go to a Great Barrier Reef, you got Australia, which is the Great Barrier Reef, but the other really great barrier reef is in the Caribbean, in Roatan. So second largest barrier reef. Really cool place to dive and learn how to dive. So my older son and I were down there. We're just like swimming around, kind of getting used to the equipment and getting certified and doing all these exercises. Anyway, we find this giant turtle, like massive turtle. Like the shell is probably almost 4 feet tall. I mean, it's just a massive turtle. And he's just like hanging out down there. Bottom's like just chill, super chill guy. And he's eating some stuff at the bottom of out of the ocean. and and so we like sneak up real calm and slow and sly. And we're swimming around this guy and just kind of like look at him and we're like, holy crap, there's a giant turtle like right here in front of me, like as far as I am from my webcam. And so we're like hanging out there and he's like looking at us a little bit and he's like, all right, I see ya. He's not scared. He's not going into his shell. And so we're looking at him and we're like, oh my God. And, not really like that because we're underwater. We're like, but we're like hanging out near this giant turtle. And after a little while, he's like, he has this little snack or whatever. And he's like, this is getting weird, guys. I'm going to get out of here. So he starts swimming out and he's like right in front of our faces. Like he's like swimming out, like right next to us. And it was just so majestic to see this guy swim. Like he's just like in his own habitat, obviously. And he's just swimming away, nice and casual, and goes to the surface, like gentle glide. And we're like, holy moly, we just hung out with this giant turtle the bottom of the Caribbean. Like this is the coolest experience. So anyway, we did 6 dives, had a great time. This is the darkest tan I've had in many, many years, as long as my wife has known me, which is like 20 years. And we had a really good time. Now I'm coming back to the deluge of email inbox that I will never ever dig myself out.
Were you in this were you guys on like a boat the entire like 6 days, or was it like you're on land like doing pool dives and then when you guys were kind of flying, we were like 2 or 3 out in the water?
Yeah, we would stay in a hotel. So we're sleeping in a hotel, and then we would go to the dive site at 8:30 in the morning, go out for a couple dives, come back at noon, have an hour break for lunch, go out for a couple dives, and come back. We didn't do any of the night dives, but night dives and the wrecks. So if avid divers love going down to see like the boats or the planes at the bottom that were from wrecks. So that's on my to-do list, my wish list for future dives.
There's a dive I've been seeing on like social media off late that's just been like super compelling. I meant last year to get PADI certified, like take the time to do it, but then this project picked up and like being able to travel like 2 hours to where you need to go to get certified never happened. But there's this one dive where it's in Hawaii. There's these like giant manta rays, like multiple like 8 feet wide, like wingspans. And it's a nighttime dive. They take you down and like you're there with flashlights, just watching these gigantic manta rays like fly like 4 feet just above you. We should do it. Scott on our team, Scott's been training to free dive, like no tank, just like hold his breath for like 3-4 straight minutes and just like go straight under the water and like snorkel, basically no tank involved. And so we got a couple adventurous folks on this team. Who knows? Maybe we have something to do next year. Who knows?
That's awesome. I would just give you a note of caution that the online part of doing the PADI cert is a lot of work, like way more work than we expected. This it was probably, I'm probably a slow data point, but it took me probably 15, 16 hours of reading, answering quizzes. I actually read it all. I guess if you tried to zip right through and not really pay attention, you could. But if you're
Mhm.
going to actually read it all, it took me probably about 15 hours of screen work before the
Yeah.
dives. Just FYI.
Yeah, I think it's like a 10 or 20 hour like learning session or something. It's pretty long from what I
You
recall.
have to do about 4 dives to do
Yeah.
all of the exercises. So it's quite a bit of time.
Yeah.
That's intense. That's a lot of fun. We never actually been properly diving, but on a handful of vacations we've done the things like swimming with the dolphins, and we actually did like a kind of a mini shark dive on one vacation as well. We were like in the water. They like took us out on a boat, and they like we did some snorkeling, just like not no tanks, just like what I was talking about with Scott, just like snorkel, hold your breath, go as deep as you want, come back up, those kind of things around some reefs. This was in the Bahamas a couple of years back, I guess, a handful of years ago, and then they also had a section of the snorkel that was optional, in which they actually put some live feed down at the bottom from the ship, and they attracted a handful of sharks. And so you were like out on a line in the back of the boat with the sharks kind of swimming underwater. So I don't even know that I could guess how far they were away. We were definitely in no immediate danger, other than the fact that sharks are much faster swimmers than us. So should they have chosen to come after us, I don't know that we would have been able to do much. But we were safely attached to a line on the boat, and the sharks were very content to eat whatever food they were feeding them down below. So,
how many waivers did you have to sign for that?
just one, right? I mean,
Just
sometimes you go in
one.
the Caribbean, it's pretty easy, right? You just kind of like if you're willing to pay and do it, then there's kind of they're up for it. So,
I've been
it was good.
snorkeling a number of times, including in the Great Barrier Reef, but it was really dead. It was,
No.
Yeah.
it was kind of depressing. I think that ship has mostly sailed.
How long ago?
This would have been in 2017, probably.
The one I went to the Great Barrier Reef last I guess late summer. And I mean, like, on my perception, it didn't feel like it was like dead, I guess. But I guess the oh, I have stable internet connection. Okay, there we go. We're back. With the data I've heard is that the Great Barrier Reef is like recovering and coming back to healthy. Like, it's like coming back
That's
alive. And it's like on an uptrend as of like 2020, 2021 sort of time frame.
Okay, cool.
So-
So I was there like maybe at its worst ever. It seemed very,
Yeah.
very much less vibrant than my childhood memories of snorkeling in the Caribbean. So, yeah.
Shashi, I'm curious. Did you take the Apple Watch, the Ultra 2? Were you diving with it the whole time?
I did. Yeah. Good
Yeah.
question. So dive computers are like these really sophisticated specialist pieces of equipment. And the things you need on a dive computer are not at all what you would need on a typical watch. And I had no idea that the Apple Watch Ultra had dive capabilities. And so our instructor was really nice guy from Argentina. He's like, "Oh, that's an Apple. That's an Ultra. Are you using it as a dive computer?" And I was like, "Well, I didn't know how to do that." And he told me what app to download. So I downloaded this app, and it automatically just kicks on. I set it, and it asked me a question of, when you're 3 feet deep, do you want it to kick on automatically? And I said, "Yes, please." And so it kicks on automatically, tracks your dive, and it's super important to track your depth. And you have, based on the pressure, you have to modulate your depth of water and stay at certain depths for a certain amount of time, so you don't rupture your eardrums, so you don't overexpand your lungs. All that kind of air cavity management is super important. And so the dive computer will show you exactly what to do. And the app, he said the Apple Watch Ultra 2 is the very best dive computer you could buy. Basically, it's a super sophisticated dive computer, better than any of the kind of very specialist dive computers out there, just based on the apps that you can download.
Yeah, it's really cool. I was like, I know it has some kind of advanced diving capabilities. I was not aware that it was even near the top of the list of available watches to wear. But yeah,
I took it down to 55 feet. It was great.
Yeah, it's excellent. Okay, we got so excited with Shashi's vacation, we didn't introduce our new member. Sophie, do you want to give everyone kind of a brief introduction of yourself and kind of tell us a little about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name's Sophie Randolph. I've been working in ops and strategy roles at early stage startups since I graduated from college in 2016. Most recently, I was running my own company that I started while getting my MBA. Since wound that down. But I've worked in a variety of industries from travel to music to mental health, all in startups. And now we're in AI. And I'm excited to take everything I've learned through all that and work with the ScholarAI team on what they're working on.
So I'm interested to know your perspective coming into AI, how it might compare to other industries you've been in before, any kind of immediate or brand new learnings you have from kind of the space in general, or specifically about Scholar AI, if you might, but more so to do with kind of AI as a holistic category.
Yeah, a couple observations. One being that this is arguably like the newest industry I've been in. All my past experiences have been in with companies and industries that were like moving people off pencil and paper to a B2B SaaS back office solution, like taking something that's like tourism is maybe the second oldest industry around. So it's not new, but the technology being applied was the new element. And so coming into AI, where everything about it is new in the grand scheme of things, is exciting because it's kind of levels the playing field for people getting into that, but it also makes it really interesting to think about building strategic advantages and knowing how things are going to play out in the long term when it's so on the early side of the industry. So that's one thing that's been on my mind and one observation. And then the other is how, especially coming from the music space most recently and following like Web3 wave and then AI, people have done a lot to apply and or attempt to apply those technologies in the music industry. And it often felt like just being done for the hype or, a solution in search of a problem and not finding a real problem. Like you can start with a solution and find a real problem, and that's great by all means in many ways. What I'm getting at is like I will never be happy working at a company where I feel like a real problem isn't being solved. So the work ScholarAI is doing, I've experienced ChatGPT hallucinating firsthand, less so in an academic research setting, but like unlocking the power of ChatGPT and AI for people who cannot afford even the tiniest hallucination out there is a really cool way to apply an emerging technology to a real problem. And I was texting a couple PhD friends over the weekend, like, hey, I'm doing some work with ScholarAI. Have you ever checked it out? And one of them wrote back immediately, like, no, but oh my God, I need this right now. I'm doing abstract research for my next research project at she's since graduated, but the research company she's at. So those are the two big observations. Like one, it's so early and that's exciting and a big unknown. And also like there's a lot of hilarious misapplications of technology that will be fun to watch play out. And I'm excited to be part of a real application of the technology.
Well, welcome, Sophie. We're excited to have you on the team and on these podcasts. So I'll just throw out a question, maybe, Sophie, if you want to take the first go at it. I've heard this time of AI described as the early days of the internet. I've also heard skeptics describe it as kind of crypto before crypto winter, expecting everything to die. How do you see it?
That's a great question. I wasn't around for the early days of the internet, or I wasn't in the front row seat. Although I do remember dial-up, and I don't.
Do you
wish
remember
that on
what
anyone.
AOL dial-up sounded? That sounds like you probably heard it on some like joke meme.
I couldn't quote it. I grew up in very rural Massachusetts. We had like one computer in the family computer room, and you got 1 hour a week on the computer. So while all my friends were on AIM, I didn't get all that till a little bit later. Like I got my first cell phone in 2012 and my first smartphone in 2014. as a sophomore in college. So even for my age, I was like pushed a little like away from experiencing those things firsthand. So no, I don't remember. I couldn't quote the login for you, but I think I think we'll see a lot of the applications of AI die out. I think the most successful applications of AI are going to be the most boring ones. Like I love solving boring problems. They're the best. They're real. And I think, as over the past 6 months, I've read a lot of job descriptions. And with that, I've read a lot of like company descriptions and, like the AI for influencer drop shipping, like just these strings of buzzwords being pulled together that like, is there really demand for that? Like, is anyone asking for that? Is often the question I find myself asking. But I think the parallel to crypto before crypto winter probably feels a little more apt, as we'll probably see like a steep drop off whenever whatever hypey thing happens next. And then the people who keep building are going to be the ones who have that long-term vision and long-term belief in the technology and the infrastructure and the way that could be applied to solutions. And that's when we'll see really interesting things emerge from the long game rather than the like whack-a-mole, like, oh, maybe AI can go here, maybe it can go there, maybe it can do that. Like maybe it can, but probably not to all of the things. Yeah.
Let's say, is it the beginning of the internet with opportunity everywhere, or is it crypto before crypto winter?
I mean, I think as Sophie was describing, like the nonsensical ideas people come with. I just wanted to. I was watching this like comedy like sketch like little like I guess like movie on YouTube, and in that movie there's a guy who has a VC pitch the next day, and what he's proposing is he wants to make this dating app where it takes two profiles and it uses generative AI to make like a story of the rest of their lives together. I just found it really really funny. Because what ends up happening is like one guy, he keeps putting himself in it with a bunch of different women. And his story, for whatever reason, because the prompting always ends with him in a motorcycle accident. Whereas like he puts one of his friends in, like that guy's living like a perfectly happy life. Like they grow older. It's like, what the hell, man? But yeah, I mean, I think like with like crypto and AI, like the comparison I draw is that like crypto has like a bunch of like very, very macro level opportunities. Like if you look at like the possibilities with it, they're very, very like large in their scope. And the problem I think is that like a lot of those implementations kind of require like a very, very like high scale of adoption that's just super hard to reach. And then like, of course you end up with like what is like mainstream pieces of crypto, which is like all the scamming, like the weird like pump and dump schemes and whatnot that kind of hurts its reputation. I think with AI though, like the thing that makes me super optimistic about is that like what you're fundamentally doing is like a lot of these tools are very directly designed to be like human emulating, right? There's things in the human process that like they're getting really, really good at doing. So to me, it's like there's probably some like there's always gonna be like a wax and wane of like startups are interesting, these startups are no longer interesting, now they're interesting again, now they're no longer interesting. But I think like the fundamental value add is just like it's very hard to deny. I think it's just a matter of like being able to apply it and people being able to adopt it, especially as like use possibilities scale up. Like we're seeing like right now, like there's a bunch of like companies doing evals, a bunch of companies doing like agents and all that sort of stuff. But like very few companies are able to sell to like a big enterprise. Like that's still taking a very, very long time. So I don't think the utility is in question. I think what's going to be the interesting piece is like when does this become like the status quo? That becomes a little bit more difficult.
Yeah, the answer is yes. It's both. I mean, I think fundamentally it is a paradigm and a platform shift, but there will certainly be kind of your classic Gartner hype cycle. We might be in the middle of it. We might be heading for it. I don't know. There's this interesting macroeconomic mix that's happening right now with AI as well, in which AI companies are basically the only companies able to raise any sort of venture capital funding right now, but still relative to, even 2 years ago, the amount of risk capital in the system is very low. And so there's probably a lot of risk capital that's going to be entering AI companies and otherwise in the relatively near future. Don't know if it's 6 months, 16 months, 26 months, but almost certainly over the next 2 to 3 years, there will be more investment into the space and kind of in technology at large. And I think you are going to get the classic kind of boom bust cycle. But if you remember, in my background and childhood experiences, doesn't sound too dissimilar to Sophie, in that I also had dial-up internet until I was 20 years old, and no real connectivity or firsthand look into the kind of .com bubble. But that was in fact a bubble, right, in which very real companies were built, and a lot of speculative companies kind of went under during that hype cycle. So I do think we'll see a pretty similar kind of scenario play out with AI. But as Lexi was saying, there's going to be real value built here, and it's really just about what companies are attacking the problems that people need the most, and who can strike this important mix of building to solve problems right now, but the building to solve problems that last. And I think that is what is becoming challenging in the very specific industry of AI, just given how emerging these technologies can be. Things that weren't capable or that weren't possible 2 days ago are possible with kind of a pretty minor unlock and progress in these technologies. But I might push back on Sophie a little bit in the influencer kind of realm. I've always long said that the world needs more influencers. There just aren't enough people making generic junk content on YouTube. So I think the more of that, the better.
Well, perhaps you could step up and
kidding,
contribute, Damon. Be the change you wish to see in the world.
That's right. If this and the next 10 or 12 ventures don't work, then maybe I have a career as a full-time YouTuber. So we'll see.
The good news is every single child between the age of 14
Right.
and 7 wants to be a YouTuber. So we got a whole bunch of up and coming posters.
Yeah. And I will say, I mean, to not throw shade for a moment, I watch a lot of YouTube, and I think that YouTube delivers an incredible value for when you can actually find substantive material. I'm not sure how many influencers I would necessarily need to see all at the same tourist attractions and taking the same photos over and over again. So
shows what's on
Shashi,
your
what
YouTube feed.
I've talked about this before, I think, but YouTube does not know what to do with me. The algorithm is all over the place. It's basically like sports talk shows, a little bit of political commentary, and then kind of hyper obscure rap videos, and it just doesn't know what to do with me. So it's an interesting mix.
Shashi, what do you think about your same question you posed?
It feels more to me like the beginning of the internet. I'm old enough to have lived through not having internet at home and then getting internet at home, and then and seeing the internet era from I was in college when the .com bubble happened. So I was kind of part of the tech scene before that, saw some success in the tech world, saw the .com bubble blow up, and a bunch of people kind of get burned from that. But then the emergence of companies that endured through that, like the Amazons of the world, who really kind of showed the way of building long-lasting value. And I think we're going to see that same thing now, that there will be companies that are building long-lasting value who are serving a specific customer need, doing it better than they could do it today, better, faster, cheaper. It's the formula for success is the same. It's enduring. You serve your customers well. You think about what their needs are, their user experience. You follow their user journey, and you just do it better. You just give them savings, give them the benefits. And if you can do that, then you're going to build a successful business. The environment around you will be turbulent because it always is. But that's the formula for success. So I see it as the early days of the internet, having kind of lived through the ups and downs of that. I can see how the enduring companies of this era, this AI era, will create incredible value. The next, the first $10 trillion company will almost assuredly be an AI company. It's almost inconceivable that it won't be. Perhaps with, depending on whether you count NVIDIA as an AI company or not, it is kind of the electricity underneath AI. So I do see it that way. Which leads me to have you heard people call kind of every AI company an LLM wrapper? And I'm curious, not the Jack Harlow style rapper, Damon, but the rapper with the W. Have you heard people call kind of every LLM company, including ours? Oh, aren't you just building an LLM wrapper? And I'm just curious your take on your response to that.
I can start. I'll just let the Jack Harlow as a rapper thing slide for now, and that being the one that you pulled out. But no, in all seriousness, I mean, I think there's a question, I think, around whether or not all AI companies are wrappers of a large language model, whether it be GPT, X 4 Turbo or whatever, or something else. I think that's a legitimate question. I think it's the wrong question, in my opinion. It's not the right question. The right question is not whether or not this is a wrapper of a different AI technology. The proper question, and the question that people should be asking, is, does this solve a real problem? And is this the right way to solve that real problem? And then if the answer to both of those things are yes, and it actually maybe doesn't matter whether it's a wrapper of a large language model or some other kind of foundational technology. I think that as an investor in these types of technologies, and obviously as a builder in ScholarAI, the way that we think about it is, how do we drive value, and what are the significant differentiators that you're building, such that you can deliver lasting value and then defend that value against maybe other would-be wrappers or competitors. So I do think time will tell whether or not those things are possible, and which companies kind of get that formula correct. But in many ways, everything new is a slight derivative of things that have previously existed. And so I just fundamentally think that focusing on whether or not this company or any other company is a large language model wrapper is just, it's a little bit of a wasted kind of thought exercise.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think especially just like this being my first like dance proper in the startup space, like all of the common wisdom is like, oh, like build like a competitive moat, and like being, I guess, like the technical lead on it, like, I don't I don't get it. I don't understand what y'all mean. Like, I feel like inherently, like, unless you're like doing like, I think SaaS especially, like, so much of it is like, it feels like the thing that's a moat more than anything is just how fast you are and how like fast you can stay. It's not so much like, if you were to look at like the list of YC companies from like the last like 10 years, like you could probably reduce most of those down to like a database wrapper of some variety or of another, right? Like you can make those same sort of simplifications. I think the thing that's emerging, I think like the reason this conversation still exists is just that like ChatGPT is so fundamentally exciting and people still use ChatGPT a lot. So as long as like that form factor is still like chat interface first, the comparison's always drawn, right? Like no one thought of like Uber as a really, really crazy database, but fundamentally that's what it is, right? It's just a location, like driver, user, a collection of many databases all working in sync. But because the form factor change, it's not thought of as this is a really fantastic database. It's thought of as Uber. And so I think like in the position we're in right now, and just not us specifically, but just like the tech space in general, like I think like the ways to apply this stuff, LLMs and chat has just felt super prominent. And that way I think a lot of the discussion ends up leaning towards like, this is just a wrapper because it feels the same. And it's just like additions to, but I think like what's going to happen is that like, I mean, we've seen this happening already, like with Devin, we've seen that happening with like a bunch of these like web browsing tools that like all of a sudden like chat becomes like one piece, but ultimately like the thing that's like the crazy value ends up becoming like the UI UX, the final outputs, the way the user engages, that sort of stuff. And that's like an insane paradigm is like what was happening when the iPhone came out, where everything for a while was just a tool built with Swift code on top of an iPhone. And then suddenly it became like much more unique. And the question of like, oh, you're just like an iPhone, like Swift library wrapper was no longer in the same field.
I think another part of that is that we're living in a time period where the mainstream is more aware of underlying technologies, especially with ChatGPT. Like it is a consumer facing product. Like I can go ask ChatGPT and ScholarAI the same question and get different results. But you talk about like at the time that Uber was founded, probably the general population was less aware of complex databases than they are aware of ChatGPT, which is interesting to think about how that evolves. I feel like the debate before, is it an AI company or is it an AI wrapper? Like we had the same conversation with, is it a tech company or is it a tech enabled company? Like, what is actually the difference? Like, are all startups now just built on the same stack of tools? And is that a bad thing? Or is that, like you're talking about, let us move faster and build our moat through customers acquired rather than technical underlying differentiation? Like Google Flights is a Sabre wrapper. Like, that's fine. Google Flights is really useful.
Yeah, I think extending it too, just to punctuate both those points, draw a specific example to lecture, is that the question becomes less about is it a wrapper? It's more, are you the flashlight app or are you Uber? Right? It's okay. You've built on this new platform. This new platform is AI and large language models, and what you really want to build are the things that are going to provide lasting value, like Uber, not the things that are going to be quickly commoditized, like the flashlight app or something like that.
Yeah.
So I think in that realm, I think that's the better question, not is what is kind of your fundamental technical moat, if you will. That said, having sat on both sides of this table for several conversations, there are a lot of new AI companies right now, and trying to sift through signal and noise in that dense a kind of company emerging company landscape can be challenging. And so if you can't point to a direct data moat or a technical moat, it can be challenging without demonstrated traction to kind of incentivize investment or to kind of convince people that you are going to win in this kind of metaphorical hand-to-hand combat.
I think another part of that is it, especially the VC's question is likely to be like, okay, if you are a ChatGPT wrapper, whether that's good or bad, what happens if ChatGPT changes the rules? What if there's no longer your plugin's gone and now you're a GPT? Like you don't control your own destiny. So how are we supposed to think about whether you're a VC backable company?
It's a fair question. I would again draw the same analog to or analogy rather to the platform of the smartphone. Right, like if all of a sudden Apple changes the rules in the App Store or Google in the Android
Which
Google
they
Play
do.
Store, 100%. Yeah, so you're always in some ways, it's not feasible to remove 100% of dependency. Right, the way that we've thought about this internally is by being able to swap in different large language models. So we're not dependent necessarily on OpenAI, but we are dependent on a large language model, right? So as long as a large language model exists in open source or in closed source, whether it be Google or OpenAI or Meta, pick your favorite flavor of those, we exist. But you still are kind of built on a platform, just like anybody else is built on AWS or pick your other. These dependencies are built into almost all technology and all kind of businesses. It's about identifying those risks and mitigating them to the kind of most appropriate effect.
Yeah, one thing I found this is just like a personal perspective thing, but one thing I've just found pretty challenging about just talking about this space in general is that it feels like the technology that's being built on the most rapid development ends up being for example, web browsing is becoming increasingly popular. I just hey, these tools are really, really good at being able to parse the web, so let's skip all the steps of making a database and let's just scrape the web directly, right? And so one thing I found pretty weird, I guess, about just internally just kind of trying to reconcile things is that I understand data moat. That obviously makes a lot of sense. You have unique data, users give that to you, you do something with that, right? You go about that way. But on the level of just pure technical moat, so much of this tech is and especially when you see archive papers come out, when you see popular conversations about hey, someone made this new approach, so much of it gets popularized and very quickly candidates for this is the best approach for this particular problem gets solved. And all of a sudden that solution is something that works very, very generically, right? So even in general, it feels, when I think about technical moat, it's just yes, we have technology. Yes, we've built custom stuff. Yes, we're like implementing new stuff faster and better. But even just like a fundamental level, like so much of it feels like a lot of companies are going to try the same approaches to a lot of things, assuming they're staying on like the breaking edge of the wave, right? Um, as long as you don't fall behind, I think that's obviously like a losing criteria. But like if you're keeping up to like here is what is working right now, it oftentimes feels to me that like at best you get like fine tuning or like maybe some custom prompting that like stands out as a competitive edge. But to me, that doesn't even feel as real as just like so much of this is so generally applicable that it stands on its own 2 feet, very, very broadly encompassing. So a lot of people are going to be trying a lot of the same things.
Yeah, I think it opens an interesting conversation that is this debate we've had internally and externally of horizontal versus vertical, right? These large language models by design are kind of generic problem solvers, right? You kind of ask ChatGPT for anything, it gives you some response with varying levels of accuracy and thoroughness back, but it obviously is a kind of a very generalist tool. And then so there becomes a debate on how general a tool are we and others building, what specific use cases are we solving for, what technology are going to kind of shine in those use cases, specifically and compared to others. It's a very interesting time. I mean, I think that yeah, in many ways, like I think that anybody stating much of this with overt confidence is kind of setting themselves up to be wrong, maybe kind of hilariously. So, just because I do think that things are moving so quickly, making any kind of broad strokes, definitive statements about things can be a pretty dangerous proposition. In closing and kind of moving on from that, if there's something else, we just hear a bit of kind of AI news that we can get some reactions to this week, specifically with a proposed, maybe even confirmed at this point, partnership between Apple and Google. Lakshay, you and I have talked quite extensively about what we thought Apple's play might be in the AI space, especially with regards to their hardware integration across their ecosystem, et cetera. I was wondering if you had any kind of immediate reactions or thoughts into what appears to be Apple in some ways maybe acquiescing and just simply saying that the Gemini platform might be the best one to build on for one reason or another, and kind of taking that approach to their iPhone in the early days. I guess the direct question I would ask you is: do you think this is following the same playbook that they followed with the original iPhone, meaning putting in Intel chips first before eventually building their own Apple Silicon chips, or do you think this is fundamentally different, some combination, whatever you think?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have confirmed that this is like a deal that was made, but I believe that like even when the iPhone was like first taking off, like they had a partnership with Google that like Google would be their default search in Safari and all that sort of stuff, like out the gate. So there is a precedent for it. I think what I'm pretty surprised by though is that like there were inklings of like upcoming this year, there'd be like a big Siri update. And that to me made a lot of sense is like, okay, this is going to be their big launch about like their play into the AI space. Like they already have a personal assistant under everyone's like wrist that you can use under the ocean. Like you have iPads, Mac, whatever. Like it's everywhere. And it's surprising to me that they wouldn't just like commit to that because that feels like something that would like actually blow like a lot of disruption like across the board. So I don't know. It's strange to me that I get why Gemini is considered really good and why they put that front and center. I'm sure like Google and Apple had a really, really long document behind that handshake. But still, like, I don't know. It would have been very interesting to see what would have happened if Apple committed to like doing this in-house, I guess.
Shash, I'm interested to hear your thoughts. Do you think this is maybe in some ways a business reaction to the dominance that Microsoft seems to be building in AI, and both kind of Apple and Google are looking across the bow, so to speak, and saying if we don't team up here, we're at risk of losing significant market share to Microsoft and the collaboration that exists with OpenAI and others there, or do you feel like Apple is making this decision because they think it's purely in their technical best interest to do so?
The Apple story is a fascinating one, and to go back to the root the root of the tree, which is Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs was a creative and he was a product guy, and he knew that at the end of his life he was handing the company over to an operations person. He knew he was handing it to Tim Cook to make efficiency, generate shareholder return in a way that Steve Jobs never could by himself. He wasn't an operations guy in nature. And one of the in the Walter Isaacson book about Steve Jobs, one of the last things he says about Tim Cook is he's not a product guy. And I think what you see is that phrase coming to life over the many years since Steve Jobs has passed away is that Apple has just not been a product company per se. It has been an operations company. It's been a very good, incredibly good, exquisite operations company that has generated tons of profit, but they haven't been able to fundamentally launch a new product. We've talked about Vision Pro and how it's a very niche early stage product that will probably not be able to outcompete the Quest over the long term, but even if it is at a price point that makes it such a niche product, it will never move the needle for Apple financially. The company story of Apple coming forward through this era of AI, it is certainly in response, as you suggest, Damon, to Microsoft's very aggressive partnership and play in the AI space with OpenAI. But it's also an admission that they can't do this. I think it's an understanding and admission that Apple can't do this fundamentally on their own, that they're not a product company. They're not very good at that. And they're not a very good software company either. And so therefore they need to find a partner who's willing to take a swing with them to create something in a direction because they can't do it themselves. So I find that thread of the Apple story to be really perhaps some of the most interesting here is that Apple is kind of admitting we understand who we are and who we aren't at this stage. Many people are seeing Apple as kind of a value stock or a cash cow stock at this stage in their maturity because they really aren't a thought leader anymore. They aren't seen that way. They're seen as just a highly efficient operational execution machine for utility, which is what we all keep in our pockets and have on our desk, our iPads, our Macs. But we don't expect innovation in any of those products. Fundamentally, we expect incremental innovation, not any fundamental innovation. And so I see it primarily as an Apple story, and an Apple story that admits that they understand who they are.
Adding one layer to that, I think it's all very interesting. They also just recently announced the cancellation or the deletion of their car project as well. So headed down a different path. Can they develop an electric car for reasons that maybe they couldn't, or maybe they just saw the writing on the wall and thought autonomous driving was further away than they would like to skate towards. I think it just maybe it's an additional data point to your point that they've failed recently in making substantial new products, and this is a way to maybe leverage some of Google's resources, talent, etc. DeepMind, that kind of thing to kind of push forward in this space. Okay. All right. Well, I think we're at time today. Thanks everybody for joining us. As always, please remember to leave your comments in the section below. We'll get to them in some upcoming conversations, and find us at all the places you find your podcast. Check us out on YouTube at the ScholarAI YouTube channel, and see you all next week.